Um, Great idea, to sort of start our getting on the road, make it a special occasion, somewhere politically strategic location as well, as we noted. So um,
Is it on the same day that
it
normally
is
is?
on our usual day, and I think that's a good segue to homing in on how much time we want to set. An hour and a half clearly is insufficient. Um, so um, I asked she asked how long to reserve for. I said we could really use the whole evening. How about, let's say, 6 to 9? Um, to what do we think? 6:30 to 9? What do we think?
Well, are you expecting to complete this all in one evening and to have people stay focused long enough after working all day, driving, doing strategic planning, and then driving back home?
Complete a plan? No.
No.
Go
Complete.
through an exercise focused on objectives. Um, Most of the way, the interesting question being um, the relationship between the discussion and some sort of ratification by the board, um, and and that's something for us to talk about tonight. But that's
Yeah.
my sense is, we keep the discussion focused on identifying object. What do you think?
So I know how we are after really, really long council meetings,
Mm-hmm.
and the brains are a little bit
Mm-hmm.
fried. You lose focus.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the common sort of knowledge is that 2 hours is usually 2.5 hours is when you start losing people.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to, number one, prep people in advance, maybe by queuing some questions to think about,
Yep.
um, and staying on task so that you're using the 2.5 hours.
We're going to talk about how to do
Yeah,
that.
because I know you do.
No, no, no,
Yeah,
no.
no.
Tonight we're going to
Yeah,
talk about
yeah.
it.
So I think those are key, because um, you do start losing people after that much time.
um, we are conscious of asking people to travel whatever distances it is are, um, and therefore um, trying to start any earlier than 6:30,
No,
right? No,
I
no.
know that would
Okay,
be a
okay,
challenge.
okay.
I'm just wanted to
Hmm.
stay really focused, but also keep our time. Let's not set too lofty a goals of what we expect from that evening.
Okay.
Keep it achievable so we
Hmm.
walk away and everyone
Hmm.
feels as though we've accomplished something and are
Hmm.
willing to come back to the table to complete the process. I think if we end up with a couple of key tangible things, even though we haven't completed this, I mean, this is a
Hmm.
pretty
Yeah,
big
yeah, yeah,
process,
yeah.
and to come to consensus or some level of consensus. So you've got to go through all the brainstorming. You know this, you do this for a living, but doing all of that, even with some preparatory work, I think keeping those goals achievable so everyone feels as though we've accomplished something and are ready to come back again and complete the process.
So I'm just trying to infer from that. So we do want the board, as close to everyone as possible
Yes.
in attendance. But do we think that um, actually making decisions that evening as a board, maybe not?
I think that would be a very lofty goal, frankly.
If
Yeah.
best case scenario
Best case
that
scenario. Yeah.
some sort of amazing consensus
Right.
forms.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's best case scenario. Um, more realistic scenario, perhaps the need for a subsequent specially convened, maybe halfway between the January and February meetings or something.
It is possible.
Uh-huh.
I just know that we're doing strategic planning for the healthcare center committee, basically setting out our work plan for the next.
Still so happy.
Yes, me too. Me too. Phew. And our first session, our facilitator had this long list of things to do, and an hour and a half into the discussion, and we did committee meeting or committee business, hour and a half into just the discussion session on strategic planning, and we had gotten through like half because and it was good discussion because the ideas started coming and one thing led to the other, and then that started forming a level of consensus around these core ideas. But I mean, we're making something from nothing. It's not like we're updating a strategic plan. We're creating something.
So then about another thought. Then about that 6:30 start time, invite people. You have a half hour's worth of social time prior, and with the
We're all
forcible
maybe
intention of
strangers.
starting on time. What's that?
I said there could be people we've never met before.
Oh no, there
Yeah. Hopefully there will
should
be, so
there should be.
I think we'd
right,
all like to, meet and get to know one another.
How do we want to use any time at 6:30 for that, or do we want to try somehow to have some of that getting to know you happen prior?
Oh, like a little mingle ahead of it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That could be fine.
I like
You
that
know what
idea.
helps mingle?
Yeah, that would,
Food.
food,
Food.
but yeah.
No, well then, yes, definitely.
What time is it starting? 6:30?
6:30, but refreshments from 6. We just decided a second ago. Keep up.
Well, I would suggest that one thing we have to decide first,
Yeah.
before we know how quickly we have to move at this next meeting, is whether or not we are going to do anything about the spring election that's coming up. These are all nonpartisan judicial races, but one of them is a Supreme Court race to
Kind of a
replace
BFD,
Shirley
yeah.
Averson, and there are some appellate court spots in there as well. The district courts, they don't really, they're not very meaningful at our level, but that Supreme Court seat.
Well, it can
It's a
be
big one.
because the drainage district, Portage County Drainage District issue was before an appeals court. I mean, it's.
Oh, the appeals courts, yeah,
And
absolutely.
it went to the
Yeah.
district court first.
Yeah.
And then the appeals court.
It's just, it's so hard to control, it's literally impossible to control for the most part, what judge is going to end up hearing
Right.
a case at the district level.
Yeah.
And it's really that appellate court where you
Mhm.
know who's going to be looking at those
Mhm.
cases that I worry most about. But, again, it's a weird thing because these are nonpartisan races.
Right.
And the lawyer in me wants to have nonpartisan judges, but the person in me doesn't want to see Clarence Thomas on the state Supreme Court. So, I'm conflicted about it, but, I don't know what others feel.
I mean, if my first inclination is, precious minutes of in-person FaceTime, with our emergent network. That is not something I would want to load onto next month's discussion.
No.
So that's my first response. My second is that if a sense of opportunity, in other words, if an issue or an angle on an issue or a line of argument, or kind of really leaped out at us as something really that somehow we could hammer home that would be salient to that election, then we should. But then my third reaction is, okay, well, how might we connect the dots between taking our act on the road as we've said that we will, as our kind of priority mode of operation, the next phase, with that election season? Well, we could let it inform our goals for our immediate term goals for going somewheres, right? We could say, well, in light of that election, here are 2 stops we should try and make in two places in the state.
So let me understand that we are expected by the party to create a strategic plan. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yes, we have that as an assignment.
We have expectations to meet as it relates to our formal relationship with the party.
It's not, after our recent experience, that aspect of it is not front of mind. We do have this obligation,
We do.
but I'm seeing this plan, properly so, as serving us. I mean, we
Right.
serve the cause of getting Democrats elected.
Right, but we
But in terms
still
of
are
relate to the party,
Right, we
yeah.
still are affiliated with the party. As such, we have an expectation of producing a strategic plan, correct?
Keep going.
So, therefore, I think it's important to create the plan
Yeah.
because, I mean, we've been running.
Yeah.
We ran, and it's, if we're always trying to react to an election cycle, we're never going to get the framework of who we are done.
I mean, that is a compelling argument against my second point.
I would agree with that, and also, for the court elections, it's going to be tough. It's certainly doable, and we all know it is, to make the direct causation link between the environmental issues and the court candidates. Unless there's something like you've mentioned, very, very specific.
Well, I mean,
that is
Dalit
a
helped us
decision.
out by, she said some things, and then we could echo them a little bit.
Well,
But I don't know that we.
this year we actually do have that though, because the Foxconn deal gives them direct access to the state Supreme Court for all issues, including environmental stuff. So any action
That's
that
right,
people
goes
take,
straight to the Supreme
That's good
Court.
enough for me.
yeah, and so yeah,
And that's a good point.
yeah.
But don't we have a framework already? I mean, we know how to respond, we've got that a little bit
Kind of without straining ourselves.
without straining ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think we can do both, but I'm sorry, I'm a planner by education, and organizations need plans.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. My question is, are we going to include things like the nonpartisan spring races
I think
in
that should be a consideration, and I also
Yeah.
I agree with you that it's tough, but I think that in my IT world, we call it perform while you transform. Like you have to do both.
Changing the wheel on the bus while it's
That's what we
going.
do in the solid waste
Right,
world too.
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the garbage keeps coming.
Yeah. either-
Yeah.
It's
Well,
a question of
our-
how nimble we are.
Our
I mean-
question on this might be elucidated by the progress we make next month on developing our plan, and does it include, becoming involved
Right.
in Supreme Court races, and how?
Well, let me use that as a segue back to how we're going to use that evening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that idea of how those 2.5 hours go in terms of the production of a plan, that puts onto the evening, that's an optimistic idea about, what a group of people can accomplish, who don't have the same experience that, we smaller group do working together.
Well, here's my fear,
Mhm.
Brad. We're gonna go over to Green Bay in a month,
Mhm.
and we're gonna sit around a table, much like this table, looking at all of us
And nobody else.
and nobody else,
Yeah.
and
Right.
work on developing our plan over there.
So the glass half full on that.
Driving money.
So
In a
here's,
snowstorm or,
No
yeah.
doubt, no doubt it'll be a snowstorm.
so here's the glass half full on that. If that turns out to be true, then probably we will be able to accomplish more.
We'll be more nimble.
Yes.
Yes.
But being ready to have more people, who haven't been involved, so we're aiming for.
Allowing them the opportunity.
Right, then
Yeah, because then they
I
can't say-
think,
Yeah.
I mean, I want to check this, right? That, because this sort of picks up, I think, on what we were saying last month, which is, if we're going to do one thing, with an amount of time like that, that thing is to brainstorm, discuss, hash out, to look for the proper set of objectives for us, that toward which the plan is steering, and toward which the group is steering, right? So that, if we were to, at the less ambitious end, try to do one thing, because we did get 50 people or 30 people, is that right? Or even 20? Would that be the right focus?
Our goal would be to have as many people as possible, I think. However, so this is what I've been writing. The best way to get people to show up is to have food.
Yes.
And so, we do this half-hour social,
Mhm.
and even devise some way to make people talk to each other.
Wine.
Wine, yes.
You're not whine at each other, but
No,
wine.
wine. And some way for people to connect and give them a card. They've got to talk to 200 people, and you've got a half an hour to do it, whatever the case may be. And they have to RSVP. If nobody RSVPs, then we know
right.
we stick with the same old, same old.
RSVP.
And we get our work done as we're doing now.
That's a good point.
And then the next, as we start the meeting, we really need an introduction of what the caucus is, what its mission is, why we formed, how we formed, and what we've done so far. So showing the memes, creating a visual, whether a PowerPoint or some other visual, so people can actually see what we've done. So they got it up on a screen. That then leads into the real meaning of the evening is moving forward. And that's when we start talking about what are our strategic goals, and we start fleshing those out. And within those goals, we choose probably 4 or 5, I would imagine not more than that. And then choose our objectives with each one of those goals or tactics, whatever you want to call it. And even if we get 1 or 2 of those fleshed out, I think we'll have been successful. We'll have connected people. We'll have demonstrated that we've done things already. We are organized because we put together a constitution. We got people showing up at the convention. And now we need to move forward, and we need a bigger group of people to do that, because the 5 of us can't be doing all of it.
Right.
So. 6. Oh, Ashley, I'm sorry, Ashley.
Well, that's 7.
7.
Oh, 7. There we go. 7. Yes, 7. 7. You forgot Ashley.
All right.
I wasn't
But
counting
you
myself.
forgot me.
I was not counting myself. And Ashley, I'm so very sorry I forgot about you.
And
I forgive you. Okay.
Thank you. I will,
and
bow down at your feet when I see you next. So.
And Ashley is still the only person on the conference call. Yes,
Or online.
apparently.
Yes, so.
And what have we got?
There's 3 people.
There always are.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a core fan base.
Okay.
Well, it's better to have a core fan base than no fan base, so.
People are allowed to be anonymous. They are. You are.
Yeah.
We'd love to know who you are if you would like to tell us. And so we'll see if anybody does tell us they're there. Okay, just wanted to say that. All that makes sense. We will figure out, having some food, we'll figure out,
Mingling.
exactly, not just, so
there a
yes,
VIP
that's
guest we
that's
would
the
wanna-
inducement,
Oh, ooh.
and then
Get
we,
Mandela to show up. I don't know. Talk about the Green New Deal in the mingle section.
I like having smart people around me.
um,
If it was in
so
the
we
mingle
have some
section,
sort of, we have some
Yeah.
sort of conversation starter.
Yeah.
You can process that. You don't need to do it right this second.
It prompts one or two concerns.
I'm
Get
shocked.
too big a group.
No more than it draws focus. Both the
Away.
both the per, both the
And
person
time.
both the person and the idea.
Although, I mean, it would be nice thinking at it, coming at it from his point of view. Like, it'd be nice probably to have, like, all right, 30 minutes only, then I'm out. Gotta
Yeah.
bounce.
Yeah.
You do the work.
Mm-hmm.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, that there's a way to do it. Okay.
But you can process this
Yeah,
in terms of your
yeah,
own
yeah.
way. And
Oh,
Yep, I see what you're
like
saying.
it.
Yep. But it goes. So the idea of having a guest star fits with the broader question that we will figure out a way to use that that time before we start to best effect.
Mhm.
Okay. Then we start promptly. We have an intro complete with a little presentation that make sure we get the main points across, and then we focus on potential objectives. Meanwhile, we will also, just to return to a thought that we voiced earlier, we will also have a way in our electronic communication, in our emails, in the run-up to the meeting, to be getting people thinking and focused. So we will also do that. And then the discussion will indeed be focused on identifying the strategic goals / objectives. And I think, if I'm in the spirit of what Melissa was just saying, that what comes under those, if we get as far as fleshing them out, and we certainly will need to immediately afterward, if not that evening, is what kinds of things tell us that we're getting where we want to go.
Outcome measures.
If that's if that's an objective, then what's our metric of progress?
Well, what you're saying is how do we measure success? Right. And so that's kind of that's sort of that last thing on how you take your objectives and say what are the measurements for each one of the objectives.
And it works both.
Right.
both directions, right? Because
Right.
if you're coming up with the right ways of measuring or gauging success, that tells you something about what that objective is, and if indeed that's
Right,
where
right.
you want to be pointed. But the point is that the output, the chief output that we're trying to
Right.
get for the discussion is the articulation of the goals, objectives, and if we're and if those 3 or 4 emerge so organically and with such consensus that we start that work of really fleshing them out in that way, also that means success.
Yeah.
So okay, good. That's we're doing tonight's work quite well, fleshing out that plan to now go loop back to the question of the spring election. I think it could pull us off track to try and make time for it in January. Um, that discussion might shape how we look at the spring election, but I do think um, to try and front load our planning so much that as we are embarking on the plan, that just within those first few months and before the plan is completed, to be trying to account for that sounds tough to me. And so alternatively, um, January is still 2.5 months out, right?
Goes fast.
But it is still 2.5 months out.
Right.
And where I was headed with this is, um, after that January meeting and looking towards the February meeting, also having the spring election on the agenda, maybe. How about that? I realize it cuts the time a little bit short, but anyway.
I guess I would ask, Dan, I think you have what you think should be done. A little bit of a plan or an idea of how you see that playing out
Well, I have no clue.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
no, sorry.
I just had the sense that you're just saying, hey, I got an idea. What do you think? Your point about all of the Foxconn stuff going straight to the Supreme Court is, I think, an important one, and probably one of the most important factors that people are not going to. Obviously, I forgot about it, and I think we should be focused on that as zeroing straight in on that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the two biggest issues in the Supreme Court races over the next couple of years are the impact of the Foxconn environmental challenges, and second, redistricting, because the state Supreme Court is going to get first crack at that.
Yeah.
And if it stays as a 5 or a 6 seat,
Right.
red, then we just basically all that does is cost us a year of time trying to get a bad map overturned, and that's what's going to happen.
Right.
So we lose an election cycle to gerrymander by not having friends on the state Supreme Court who are willing to at least look at the case. So I see these Supreme Court races as a key element in democratic strategy for the state over the next 4 years. And
you're right.
And environmental.
And environment,
Yeah.
And if
Well, I think some of these lawsuits coming out of the Central Sands with the CAFOs and the groundwater contamination, they're going to end up there, and
you always have to look 2-3 years down the road at what these seats' impacts are.
You're absolutely right.
So it's an important thing, and my big concern is that for the last couple of months now, or I shouldn't say couple of months, but for the last month, every Democrat I have talked to has kind of been in the position of, whew, we did it, we won, we took the State House back, and now we can just kind of relax for a while and not worry about it until the presidential primary. But we got work to do. So
you are right.
I'm just a little concerned about that everybody's laying back on it. Now, is a month going to cost us that much time? No, I don't think that we need to devote. But I think it's an important consideration as to whether or not we do get involved in it.
Well, I'm utterly persuaded, as an active Democrat, right? So, I mean, from what you say, it's clear what the stakes are and how important the election is, and how all of us should, keep working.
Imagine if we got 50 people showing up next month, encouraging them to like us on Facebook, and then start that that's that much more people, and encouraging them all to repost, and we can start putting that kind of information out that you beautifully put together before, and with that focus on the Supreme Court, that's just another opportunity to start spreading that and start working that election.
Yeah, if nothing else, just reminding people what the stakes are. Because like you said, it's
Right.
very easy to just forget about
Yeah.
the Supreme Court and
I
not,
forgot about it.
yeah.
I didn't forget about the Supreme Court, but I forgot about basically all other courts are unimportant except for the Supreme Court as it relates to Foxconn.
The lame duck fight was over the date of the 2020 Supreme Court election, correct?
That's correct,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
Yeah, it's too late to change it for next
Yeah.
year, but the 2020 has now been moved. Although
No,
that's going to be your court challenge.
No,
Yeah. No, I thought
no,
that they did.
they shelved that.
Did they
Yeah,
shelve
they
it?
did
That's the
not.
one thing that's the one
Oh,
thing
yeah,
that
that's,
they chickened
yeah,
out on.
that's right, because
Because
there
it
was-
costs money.
It costs money,
Yeah.
and
And they
you have
feared the wrath of
conservative-
Yeah.
72
Yeah.
county clerks.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, so we're,
Basically.
you know,
Yeah.
get a little bit of a boost in 2020.
So, is our consensus that this question of what we can contribute towards the Supreme Court election does not need to be a focus January 23rd, and we can be poised after?
There's not gonna be early voting for it, correct, or is there?
Not in the same way.
Not in the same way. I think it's narrowed to 2 weeks.
2 weeks or something like
So-
that,
And I
yeah.
don't know.
Excuse
We don't know
me.
yet on the primary. I suppose they have to turn in their paperwork, so.
Well, it'd be nice to know who's running first.
As far as I know, there's only one candidate on the progressive side who's declared.
Okay. Yeah.
But, and that shows just how little focus there has been.
Who is it?
Neubauer?
What's that?
Wow.
Yeah,
Neubauer?
yeah. Who went to law school at my alma mater, so she's automatically my favorite. But,
Ding ding.
but yeah, it'll be interesting to see if anybody else seriously even jumps in.
I feel like we would have seen some papers floating around somewhere.
Yeah, because she's
Although weirder
she's
things
been
have
out there
happened, I
for
suppose.
a couple
Ever.
of months now.
Before November, she was out.
Yeah.
Okay, here's what. Maybe one of the. So I'm trying to think. How the January 23rd agenda is in relation to the spring election, and my latest thought is. I think it will serve our group and the discussion well for us to be thinking, generally speaking, about elections, right? I think to kind of to stay grounded again in that special role that we play, as distinct from other environmental efforts. To be mindful as we're talking about our objectives that that those objectives should have something to do with winning elections, and so maybe what to do with this is as a prompt to the discussion. For all of us to be thinking about the various elections that are coming over the next couple of years.
Well, why don't we just we do it this way? Let's just say that an item we'll put on the table in January is whether or not these nonpartisan elections should be something that we focus on in the strategic plan. Is it going to be a line item in the strategic plan or not? And then if it is, then that's obviously
Go down that
our
rabbit
agenda
hole.
for February.
Meaning 19 and 20 also, right? In
Yeah.
other words, we can be thinking of them as a category, right? We can be thinking
Yeah,
of
nonpartisan.
the Supreme Court seats.
Yeah.
But also the county board seats, county supervisors.
Yeah, well,
these are
point taken, right?
yeah. I mean these are important
It
pieces.
is, it's huge, and I can tell you, I mean, right here in Portage County, without that progressive kind of semi-flip, I don't know if we would have gotten a referendum for the healthcare center
Mhm.
on
Oh,
the
yeah.
ballot. It wouldn't have happened. I needed that support. Those additional 6 or 7 seats, huge.
And in Dane, Joe Parisi, love him or hate him, pushed the whole renewables thing by himself.
And that's a
And-
very, I'll get you the link for that. Have you seen the video?
I have not.
Oh,
but,
it's great. It's, you want to go rah, Dane County, renewable energy, you are the heart of Wisconsin.
Man, well,
Yeah.
I don't know. I would do that, but
Yeah, but I mean, you're watching it and you're just going, okay, I want that. I want,
Here's what's good about that, I think, because the nonpartisan elections pose a challenge, right? A certain colleague of ours on the city council has been wondering about the mayor's race and the stance of the county party with regard to mayoral elections. And we kind of asked about that, and it's unusual for the party to weigh in.
well, typically, don't they just say, dear Portage County Democratic Party members, these people who are running for election are party members. I don't think they've
Right.
endorsed.
Right.
Well, I know in Marathon County they endorsed, this year was probably the first year they did that. And it caused kind of a stir with some people.
Okay.
So you just, I don't know. It doesn't bother me. I mean, I'm not under any, misunderstanding that this isn't politics, no matter what you call it,
Right,
Democrats,
right.
Republicans, progressives, whatever. But it does kind of hit people the wrong way sometimes. So just being mindful of.
But the thing that is completely natural for us is to be highlighting appropriate wedge issues.
Totally.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And making sure
Right?
that,
I mean,
that
that's
we're-
like
Yeah.
we
yeah, we're focused on
exist
that.
for
Right.
that.
Well,
Yeah.
and the voter turnout, I mean,
Right.
is even bigger.
Yeah.
real-
Well,
issue
we're
than
premised on the
nonpartisan.
belief that we drive home the right wedge issues and it helps, right?
Right. Well, it engages additional groups of people and to consider voting
Yeah, and
for the
non-
Democrat or the progressive in a nonpartisan race.
So I
and the
think
turnout numbers go so far down for the nonpartisan races.
But at the same time,
But if you can find
those
out-
elections probably have a bigger ripple effect long term.
Yeah.
It's the
Then-
feeder program. Holy
Absolutely.
cow.
And also
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
keeps issues in the news.
Yep.
When your county board is doing something, that's what you hear about.
Yep.
I mean, you never see what kind or
No.
one of the other
No.
CD members,
Mhm.
House members is
Yep.
doing. But you hear about your county board once a week,
Mhm.
and so having
It's because you call them up because you have their cell phone number, first
Yeah.
of all. But
okay,
Yeah.
calm down.
So-
Here's what I'm getting from this last part of the discussion. A couple things. So I think that we've kind of talked our way into seeing how the right kind of framing of this challenge of the nonpartisan elections in 19 and 20, right, actually helps us in a couple of ways. As a reminder that what the bottom line is for an effort like that, which is more Democrats in office, and perhaps also a kind of a natural context for being in the mindset of how do we highlight issues, how do we identify the issues we want to highlight, and how do we run with them. So I think we've come up with an answer about the relation between the two. But let me return to that other idea. I mean, I think we had this idea of getting on the road, right, and listening,
Mhm.
right? And
We'll find
Um,
out if it's flop or win.
so I said earlier, obviously I've been concerned about um, how much we take on for the next, few months. On the other hand, um, it would be entirely realistic for us to plan those first couple few listening sessions. And, um, we can probably be strategic enough to make good choice, in the same way that we made the choice of where we want to have this big planning session, um, with that statewide perspective and the idea from the last month of, who wins Green Bay wins Wisconsin. Likewise, our choice of some of the spring election listening sessions um, can be made in light of what we're talking about here, about where we think that there's, high salience of some local issues, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, even if we push off things to February, we'll still be working with roughly the same amount of time between then and the spring as we worked with between our
I had a similar
post-formation.
thought. I had a similar thought. We did, um, despite not being in good sync with staff in DPW, that from our end, we were on task
Mhm.
in the last 6 weeks, such that, we had something 4 weeks out that, reflected some forethought and effort, that we hadn't had a couple weeks prior. So I think that I agree with you about that sense of the time and what we learned the last time here.
So yeah, let's visit the issue of nonpartisan races, in a formal manner next month then. And if we decide to put it on the plan, we run with it then. So.
But we can all, we'll also draw up we'll plan the agenda for next month with reference to different kinds of elections that are coming. Local, judicial, legislative, etc. Okay.
They all be important.
Yeah,
Right.
and I have to say, the next 4 years, in a very perverse, twisted way, Evers' win makes our job exponentially harder. Wisconsin now has a giant target on it
Mhm.
from the National Party, and
Well, either way.
oh well, but the thing about having the governor go Democratic this year means that the gerrymander is now at risk. If Walker had won, they would have been able to re-gerrymander for another 10 years at the next redistricting. And that gerrymander gives the RNC 2 additional House seats. And they are not going to hand those over without a fight. It is, from what I see, the state Republicans are going to have a bottomless pit of money over the next 4 years to ensure that they hold on to the legislature and try to take back the governorship in 2012. And I think we are going to be in for a heck of a fight. We are going to be up against long, long odds. So, our advanced strategic planning far out to at least 2022 is, I think, an important part of everything we do now, if not beyond. And historically, from what I've seen, the state party, everywhere around here, we only look to the next election, and that's it.
Well, and our institutional knowledge just kind of also, so.
Yeah.
I mean, this is starting to make me feel like the segue from the intro to the discussion is to look at the forthcoming election. Just kind of, okay, let's remind ourselves, the next few cycles.
Well, a strategic plan is really a 4 to 8 year plan.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a 1 year plan, it's not a 2 year plan, it's not an election cycle plan. It is broader than that. It should be. It should have continuity into the next one, and otherwise it's just sort of, yeah, a lot of busy work.
I feel like we should start talking about nitty-gritty details, such as format, such as, you know, how we're going to present this to the group that we may have.
So, I mean, I think we have at least the outline of a plan, right, that says, we're gonna invite people for 6 o'clock, we're going to have food. Yes, need to figure out what food, how we're gonna
Cheap
pay
food.
for it.
Costco pizza. It always works.
Yeah, Costco cakes I heard
Well, it's
are
not that- I
really,
mean,
really good.
You know, but we have no idea, the important part is what we do in the meeting.
Yeah.
So,
And
That would
we
be-
said that we want to get a running start to the meeting in that pre-meeting period by structuring some getting to know you. We have the idea of having someone prominent join us for that. We said that next comes an introduction that gives the background. I just a second ago introduced the idea of whether an appropriate segue from that introduction that talks about where we've come from and how we've shaped it to this point, literally that a segue might be to say, and now we're looking towards here's the series of elections, and maybe with a little bit of that political analysis in there.
the stakes by Dan.
Yeah,
That's what I was thinking,
Yeah.
right?
yeah, you can be persuasive.
I'm trained to be.
I know.
But
That's why I'm saying, use your skills.
I would also include in that a brief review of this last election, because I think it went very differently, at least from what I see. It went very differently from the way that Democrats throughout the state think it did.
And that's the discussion that we had at this table a month ago.
Yeah. As I said then, I'm putting together a new data set that actually has usable information in it. And there's some surprising
like
things
that.
in that. And although I'm not ready to make any pronouncements about it, I'm seeing stuff from the election data that runs contrary to the standard democratic wisdom that is prevalent in the state. I think that we are losing elections for different reasons than we think we are, and the data shows that. So a very brief, 10 minutes of this is what just happened to us. Here's what we've got coming up in the future. How can we change
How
it?
can we change it? I like that.
Because I would like to make certain that our strategic plan, whatever it comes out to be, is evidence-based.
Well, it's always, what is the problem, and how do you propose to fix it?
Yep.
So,
Yeah, so let's
We have to define the
Yeah,
problem.
let's have a little 10, 15 minutes about, here's the problem, here's where we're losing.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
figure out what we're gonna do about it.
I wish the state Democratic Party would, that's what they need to hear too.
No kidding.
yeah, and maybe it'll take the, outlaw the Environmental Caucus to shake things up.
I hope
So-
so. I mean, that's why
All
I'm
of-
doing this
so all-
database.
Yeah.
I'm putting it together, it's actually down to ward level rather than county level.
Really?
Because the county data, it's just useless. I mean, to compare, we see this big spot of blue up in the north part of the state.
Oh,
that's, and people say, oh, look, we've got this stronghold. It's like 4,000 votes we get out of that. It's
Yeah.
smaller than my ward in Sun Prairie.
So this combination of things
Mhm.
that we're talking about here.
We'll get kicked out of the party, but that's okay.
Yeah,
No.
and we'll become the new progressives. So,
Retrace.
Just kidding.
Yeah, just, or they will go, enough people will go, wait a minute. They have a point.
So retracing our steps, or retracing our path of this thing, looking at looking ahead to the timeline and the stakes, and an autopsy of the last election. And I don't want it to be much more than 15 minutes before it gets thrown open to the floor.
Absolutely not.
Mhm.
No, it's quick and it's to the point.
Yep.
Here's what we see.
Scare the bejeebers out of them and let's get going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, but the autopsy itself could easily take 10 minutes.
Yeah, but
You see what I'm saying? Let's just say I want us to rehearse this.
Well, wait a minute, David. I see what you're trying to say. You want to try to use as much the time efficiently.
Right,
But we have to provide context. We'll have people who may be showing up that weren't at convention and weren't in that room getting the context.
You're okay if it's 6:50, 6:55.
If it's 20
Yeah.
minutes, let's
Yeah.
make sure because you want people to make decisions based on
Right,
the context.
I'll relax.
We're providing context. We're defining the problem. That's key to
Fine.
what
I'll back off
yeah.
on the 15 minutes, but I would like, but I think we would be smart to rehearse. I think we should do dry run.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And the thing, what you're looking for here, your opening statement to the jury sets out your case,
Yeah.
but doesn't delve into evidence, and that's what you're looking for here. You're not going to get into details.
Did any of you go to Ever's budget thing,
Yes.
the people's budget? I thought that was an amazing way to run something like this.
Yeah.
Because he basically showed up and he said, hey, yada, yada, yada. I mean, it was shorter than 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And then he said, all right, break up into groups, talk about your issue. We're talking about economic development, we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about this. And then it was an hour and a half of small groups hashing it out. It was amazing.
Then
So
how did they report back to the?
he had staffers there just like furiously taking notes. He had one facilitator and then one crazy note taker.
Oh.
And then he dropped by each
It was
each
amazing.
group, and not for a short amount of time either. I mean,
He listened.
He sat, I'd say, probably at least 15 minutes with each group and listened to people talk.
Now, I don't expect we get that many people, but I think that was a really cool way to run a session, similar to what we're trying to do. And it also makes people want to talk a little bit more since
Right.
they don't have to walk up to the mic and say, I'm so-and-so
Oh,
from
yeah, yeah.
whoever. Maybe they do want to do that. I don't know. I wouldn't have a problem, I guess, if I had something to say.
Me either.
But
And
I could
see,
imagine a world.
I might,
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
I mean, I've been to lots of big meetings where they break up like that. Sometimes where you break up for just like 2 minutes, and so you have to, and then each group has
Speed
to
dating,
report.
yeah.
It helps. It's great. I love
I agree.
that sort of stuff.
It's very helpful.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of people who come up to me after county party meetings or other places I'm at where I've stood up and said something, who afterwards come up and say, I'm so glad you got up and said that because I just didn't have the nerve to
Mhm.
criticize somebody, blah blah blah, and so I think you have to be able to give people that opportunity.
Yeah.
Melissa's point about our SPPs is an important one.
Yep.
We should put some effort into knowing in advance because 40 people versus 20 people versus 10
Changes
people
what you
is
can do.
totally
Right.
different.
I like the idea though, Katie. That was
It was a really great
Yeah.
thing.
And if we, if
And I'd love to
we
see
have
reports
tremendous
developed from
success and we do get 40 plus
Nerds
people,
and
yes,
takers and fast.
yes, we should have some sort of not for the entire time, but
Mhm.
for a chunk, we should break down in small groups.
And to Mary's point, like the 2-minute thing, maybe it's not 2 minutes, but when you say, this is all the time you got. Get the
Yeah,
word.
that seems to be important.
Yeah.
Because otherwise people,
No. We did something similar to that for the electronics recycling program because we're looking at changes to that. So DNR facilitated very similar, and then we rotated.
Yeah.
And the outcomes, it seemed a little chaotic, but oh my God, the outcome was great.
And also, I think what's important is the reporting back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's nothing more frustrating than doing your work in a small group and then what happens to it,
Right,
you
right.
know, in whatever way that comes.
So we might need a couple of people that are dedicated to taking down everything in those small
Yeah.
groups. And not necessarily somebody that's participating.
Hmm.
Not somebody that's participating necessarily. Maybe it's one of us, I don't know.
Well, but it can be.
I mean, if we're on the south side of, say, 15, if we are just like a dozen or 15 people, I think, I mean, maybe a very short breaking down into very small groups. On the other hand, if we're on the north side of 20, then, then definitely
Sure.
have that. And if we have even more, if we have 30 or 40, then I think that much more time broken down into groups that are going to be a little bit bigger. That are, instead of being, 4, are going to be, say, 6 or whatever. Let me pause for a second and let Ashley chime in if she has anything on her mind, and also to ask Dan if anybody has said anything in comments.
No comments yet.
You still with us, Ashley?
I'm still here, yes.
Okay.
I think I'm good.
All right. So this is how we've gotten to. So now we're in the heart of the whole group discussion, which starts to develop. Starts to say, starts to express some potential goals, objectives, strategic goals for us, right?
Yeah, can I go back? Now I'm mapping it a little bit. Since it's your data, you want to put together what will be a short visual presentation. I don't know if you use PowerPoint or some other.
I'll run together a PowerPoint and circulate to you guys so you can see what.
And, showing some of the things we've done, and now, yes, we've done it, there's still a problem. So if you can get that, then you can try to gauge it towards that 15-minute time frame because we've got 30 minutes for the social, 15 minutes, this is going to be like speed dating on steroids here. 15 minutes for the intro. That leaves, quite a bit of time then for.
Except that I was ready to concede that. I mean, given what we talked about having in the introduction, the 15 might be ambitious. Might be a bit of a squeeze. So.
Well,
and the point about 2.5 hours is to be mindful, right? That there might be, or might not, I don't know, but a trailing off of energy and focus after the 2 hours,
Well,
right?
it's also in the middle of a work week, so
Right.
people aren't going to want to
And
stay
and
late
those
for
were
all
right.
of
That's
it.
right. And
Right.
people will start. That's
Yeah.
right. So if we've 6:30. It's a little before 7. Then, right? That means that the heart of it
You got an hour and a half.
is 7 to 8:30, right?
You have an hour
That's
and a
right.
half.
and do you take a short break? Maybe have some coffee for people at that point.
No,
5 minutes to
no,
get up and grab
no,
a coffee?
not at that point.
I mean, at some point, I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about 2.5 hour session.
Well,
I think that's tolerable without
Yeah,
a break.
yeah,
Okay.
People can get up if they
yeah,
need to.
if they need to go to the bathroom
Yeah.
or whatever, they can.
We may want to plan for some coffee. I have a commercial coffee maker that I can bring. If they don't have any in Brown County.
Where are we doing this in Greenville?
The Brown County party.
Okay.
What's the address? We know.
I've been there, but I don't remember the
I
name.
have not.
It's a former bank building, I
Oh,
believe.
is it downtown?
It's not in downtown, but it's in the industrial area of it, and it's
Off of Webster?
I can't remember what street I live on.
Oh.
My brain doesn't work for
I'm
that.
a street person.
Yeah, never ask me for directions. It is on Chestnut Avenue, off of near Walnut and Ashland, down by the water.
That's Ashwaubenon area.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take your word on that one.
What's the address?
118 South Chestnut.
It's South Chestnut. Yeah, it's between the river and the stadium, kind of.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I've been there to drop off
That's not-
ballot literature and other things. but I've
Yeah,
never,
and it's nice you don't have to go downtown. You can get off of 172 and
It's right there.
it's right there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a couple of minutes off the expressway.
Yep.
So, but
And if we're
Chestnut
talking,
Avenue.
yes,
and if we're talking about the nuts and bolts, the agenda then is some variant of what are the right objectives?
It's a little farther up. My mistake. It's a little further up, but okay.
What are the right objectives for this effort? And how will we know that we are making progress toward those objectives?
well, one thing that I would want to say from the beginning is that however we frame it, a danger that we face that happens all the time down in my part of Wisconsin is issue collision. There are environmental issues that are simply at odds with each other, and we constantly get supporters from one side of or the other facing off with each other over control of direction.
I'm concerned. I mean, the Green New Deal was mentioned. I'm concerned. I'm concerned about how we could get wrapped around that axle.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that.
And I was glad to see David Roberts, write an extended reflection on the issue there, because he was writing. He went directly at the question, what's going to happen in the Democratic Party with this.
Yeah. So we've got to frame it in a way that we don't allow it to devolve into a, power line opponents versus renewable energy guys, or, fisheries and sports fishing versus, Great Lakes.
I'm comfortable.
Hunting versus.
Are setting that out as a discipline for the discussion. And again, we have said that we want to give cues in our email communication prior. Now, looking forward from this meeting, and we have already used over an hour, and therefore have maybe just over 15 minutes left, but that from this meeting, unlike other meetings where the next communication is with the whole group, no, the next, I want us to look at a draft agenda, a draft message.
To your point, is the way to avoid that is keeping the strategic goals broad enough to allow those issues to reside there without conflicting with them.
It's not a matter of breadth. It's a matter of in relation to this effort's emergence and evolution. This is a strategy for the kinds of things we're going to do. This is a strategy for how this effort takes shape and harnesses the energy of people, and therefore does not need to be with specific reference.
That's what I'm
Right.
trying to say.
Yeah.
Avoiding the specific issues, whether it's
Right.
80 feet
And
is enough or whatever it happens to be.
It's about the impact we want to have.
And it's very easy to refocus people onto that if you just make sure you keep control of the situation and head off potential problems. I just think that we just have to avoid the free-for-all that often develops down south with these things, where you sometimes get shouting matches between people. Oh yeah, there's a power line going in. There's an ATC power line project that is getting huge amounts of opposition from the rural areas of Dane County. But Madison City understands that you can't have renewables without new power lines, and so they're just at loggerheads sometimes.
Nuclear energy is an issue in Green Bay that we're going to, that is a bit controversial as well.
Oh yeah, Dane County's the same way. I actually get called a nuclear Nazi every once in a while because of that.
I worked at a nuclear plant, so.
Yeah, and I started life as a high energy physicist, so I'm fine with it. But boy, there's a lot of people who aren't, and
I have a tendency to be fine with it as well.
Yeah.
After working there, I'm like, oh, this is fairly safe.
Yeah, but and that was actually an issue at the convention. There was between me and John Becker. And it erupted in a little bit of a spat at the convention over the summer.
Hey, you're the guy who said that we have a bright future in this group to get involved in platform plank debate.
And we should.
Once we're grown up a bit more.
Yeah.
I can see those issues colliding, and we lose sight then of the overall goal of electing Democrats, protecting the environment, and saving our state.
Yeah. And that's how you bring it back. You have to say, look, we can differ, but at the core
Let's
of it,
have that fight when these people are elected.
Exactly.
Bring it.
When we're at the table, then we can talk.
Yeah. I always tell people, win the election, then change the world. That's the correct order. You can't do it the other way. So you
There's
bring
always
it back
going to be
like
these
that.
niche issues that are affecting very specific parts of the state, and and the overall goal. I just actually posted on my Facebook page today, off of the link that you shared from the Star Tribune, the Minneapolis Star Tribune, and somehow federal legislators put together in a very short period of time, when you start thinking about legislation, the Safe Water Drinking Act, and the Clean Water Act, and the Clean Air Act, and the Safe Disposal, what is it called? Oh, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, National Environmental Policy Act. When you think about that work, that was done in a very short period of time for a Congress to put together. And it wasn't focusing on the fact that the Cuyahoga River was burning. It focused more broadly on the damage that pollution was doing to our entire environment.
And it's very typical, I think, for environmental issues to turn that quickly. If you look at what's going on in Milwaukee right now with the lead laterals, which I consider to be an environmental issue.
Absolutely.
Although a lot of people would disagree. I think it is. Milwaukee is just 100% focused on this. All of their assembly and state senate people, they're just zeroed in on funding to deal with this problem. The rest of the state's opinion is, why should we pay for Milwaukee's mistake? And so there's just this standstill. But I think what you're going to see is that there will just be this sudden shift where something will happen in the news or in somewhere in society where the rest of the state will suddenly see, oh my God, these kids are getting wiped out by this lead problem. And then all of a sudden, the whole state changes. And I've seen that happen with environmental and social issues so many times. And we can be the catalyst for things like that
Yes.
if we try.
Yeah.
So it's, I think that when we have the discussion about our strategic goals, we ought to focus on talking about things like that. How can we make change on issues rather than what issues should we be focused
yeah.
on to make change? How do we reach the
Oops.
voters rather than
Just
what
wanna put-
voters are we
you
trying
can
to
flip
reach?
it.
I think both of those are important questions, but people always forget about the method part. They always talk about, oh, we've got to hit this issue, we've got to hit this message, but then nobody talks about, well, how do you do that? Is it Facebook the right way? Is it direct mail? Do we need in face? Do we knock doors? That part of it is never discussed at political meetings. It's always just message and issue. So I think we need to make sure we devote equal time to both here if we're going to be eventually effective.
But
Oops.
at this stage of things, in the mode of what we're doing, it's not equal measure.
I think that you're correct. At this stage, it's very difficult for us to call.
We're taking a moment. Both in what we've just done and how we've come to this point and the midterms we've just been through, and in the election cycles to come, we will be figuring out what issues to work on. And in fact, a lesson of our recent experience is that the right issues to work on will tend to emerge if we're clear about our role and the kinds of things we want to be doing. And so I think what we want to be saying about the task of this moment, and particularly of that evening, is to keep a focus on how we do the work, right? Is to keep a focus on, what do we do? What's the contribution we make? How do we make an impact? Not, this issue's going to set the world on fire and make our job easier. No, not that, but sort of more closely focused on what we'll be doing and how we make an impact, right?
Yeah, I think we need to work on structure rather than substance first.
Yeah. Yes.
And
Absolutely.
then once we have that in place, we can start to pick individual issues that we're going to focus
Right.
on for the upcoming future.
So, David, and Mary, going way back to when we first started thinking about this, and working with Jerry, of course, we said, and our argument to the party was, because some people in the party said, well, a caucus is for an underrepresented group. And we argued that the underrepresented group that we're focusing on for this caucus is the environment. So our constituency is the environment. So staying focused on our constituency, the environment, in general, keeps us away from some of that issue collision.
I'm not sure about that. I think if I were to kind of go back in the same spirit of, okay, like where our roots lie, where do we start from, and what can we remind ourselves from that founding moment?
Right.
So I think many of us remember the word confidence was prominent in the
Yes, it was.
articulation of our role and
Yeah.
mission, right? Again, I think I'm speaking in the same spirit as you, but I'm looking a little differently. We believe in the power of these issues. And in fact, this almost identical group, 1 month ago, others in the group was, expressing even way more confidence than I have had in the power of those issues, right?
Mhm.
But no, I wouldn't say that it's, the environment is our constituency. No, we want to leverage the power, the political power we believe there is in these issues. And so, how? Right?
Mhm.
How? And the issues are there. We know that.
Lots. Yeah.
What we have to continue to focus on is sort of our theory of the case of exercising that leverage. How?
That doesn't conflict at all with what Melissa said.
I think it is the same.
I think it's the same.
Well,
Our constituency is the environment. Now the question is, how are we going to?
Oh, I wasn't hearing that.
Consensus.
Okay, I wasn't hearing that. So that was offered more as a stipulation, than something we had to remember. Because when I think of a constituency, I think of, okay, well, I need to keep that
I'm
perspective.
just using it in sort of theoretical terms.
We are
If
responsible for the environment.
We
I
are
mean,
responsible for the
We are
environment.
becoming the agent of the environment.
Correct.
So, as the agent of the environment,
Yeah.
how are we going to proceed to make those issues more?
We are the advocate, kind of like when I worked domestic violence. I was the advocate for my clients, my constituents. I advocated on their behalf, helped them fill out forms. I protected them. So that's the same thing. We are the advocates. We are the
Lorax, Dave.
we are the Lorax.
I get that. I mean,
I see a new logo coming up for the group here.
Well,
what's useful in the discussion we're having, and why I'm scratching my head and looking a little confused, is this. This is smart of us to be thinking how to avoid the kind of brawl that
mhm.
we know there could be, and how wasteful that would be, and just counterproductive,
Yeah.
right? And it wasn't clear to me how that idea of us representing the environment as a constituent helps
The
us to
environment
avoid
is
getting.
all around us. It's everything.
Mhm.
It's not one thing. It's not one issue. It's everything. It is not one issue. It's not protecting the
Right.
groundwater.
It's not Foxconn.
It's not Foxconn. It is life. It's our economic means. It is everything.
Maybe a way to express
Our
this
health.
is to say that the caucus cares less about individual issues than it does about electing people who care about those issues. That our goal is to put people into office whose mindset is orientated toward
Exactly.
the environment,
Striving
not to
high.
worry about
I like
each
that.
individual issue. That's their job once they get elected.
Yes. And then we can talk to them about.
Yeah. Because there's plenty of groups out there already who are focused on their issue.
Right.
They can go lobby those elected officials once we
Absolutely.
get them into office.
Right.
And they can decide what's best.
Excellent. I like that.
Yeah, our niche is really pre-election.
Yep.
It is not,
Yeah.
Post-election, that's somebody else's problem.
Yeah. And so that may be something we should make
I
sure we
think
put
that
in the plan.
captures the point perfectly. We are down to our last few minutes. So I want to use those to, next steps, talk about next steps. In 30 seconds or less, there's an interesting exception to what you said about pre and post election, which is, and we touched on this in the last discussion, that so now we won and we didn't win the legislature, and we're in this weird situation, right, of having half power. And we noted that we're going to have something to say for ourselves. And that's the post-election part. But it is always with a view towards
the next
towards exactly.
Never rust.
Everything we've just said in the
So-
last few minutes is, I think, exactly on point.
So I'm still sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
you, but I'm anxious about. I'm a planner too, and I've done visioning sessions up the wazoo.
Right.
Are we thinking about a mass brainstorming session? Somebody writing it out on a flip chart.
Thinking about
Are
how
we-
it's going to.
Mhm.
How?
Yeah,
Visioning person.
We need to.
How is it going
How
to?
is our-
how is it
how are we
going to
gonna do
work
it?
out?
I'm not hearing like a question. I'm hearing, okay, we're gonna break up into groups, but I'm not hearing,
The question is, what are the proper goals for this effort? Because a strategic plan should be oriented at objectives. And we are not going to write a strategic plan sitting in a group in 2.5 hours or 2 hours. And so, since the heart of the matter is to be clear about what you're aiming at, then we want to use this in-person time that we've put some effort into bringing people together and have that focused on talking about different expressions of what we could be aimed at and talking about which ones fit best. And we could
How
throw
would
them
you
up.
frame the questions? If you were asked to frame a few key questions to start that conversation, what would one or two of them be?
Well, let's start from where Dan's going to end, which is, bottom line is we need to have more seats at every level of government. What are specific objectives that are going to get us there?
I think that's what you're saying too.
What about this? Throw out this question: if you were out knocking doors for a candidate, and you were going to convince people to vote for somebody based on an environmental issue, how would you approach that person? What would you say to that person to convince them that they should vote for a Democrat? At the core, that's the question we have to answer
That is true.
to make a campaign, if you want to call it that, of some sort out of here. And I think the answers that you're going to get from different people are going to differ dramatically across different parts of the state, and they are going to be very, very surprising in some cases. I knock some doors, but there are people who do 100 times more than I do, and their approach to talking to potential voters is far different than anything I would have even imagined.
And we the reason we want to have listening sessions
Hey,
is to
John,
hear
can I call you
that.
back?
But
Okay.
that doesn't sound to me like it tees up the articulation of objectives.
Well, but I think what it does is get people talking about how you speak to voters. And if what we're talking about here is structural rather than issue-based, if that's our first thing, do you talk to voters via Twitter? Do you talk to them in mass mailings? Do you talk to them door to door?
Now you're getting into tactics, which is
Maybe
Tactics
to
it is too
accomplish
tactical.
objectives.
yeah,
maybe it is too tactical.
So, Mary, you're the rhetorician. Did I say that right?
Rhetorician.
Rhetorician.
I don't have anything yet.
Okay.
An objective would be, for instance, how many counties are there?
72.
All right. An objective would be having an active point of contact, having the reach of this effort extend, into every county. And you could
That would
say,
be a strategic goal.
Yeah.
And then you would have objectives within that and the tactics.
What would,
now, goals and objectives sound awfully interchangeable to me. They're aim points.
They're a little bit different, but
I mean, you
I
could
want
say,
to have 60% Democrats elected to the legislature. That's a goal.
that's a
My-
goal for the party.
My objective.
Is that a
my
goal for
objective
the?
is to
Not just 60% of the votes.
Right.
right.
That's my objective, and then I have different steps to be able to get there.
Right.
Yeah, I worry a little bit about setting goals in a political context, though, because it's so easy to miss them horribly through no fault of your own. I mean, if we start saying, "Oh yeah, we want to elect 60% Democrats,"
That's right. I think it's goals for the effort. We need to keep this, kind of rooted in a sense of ourselves.
Awareness raising more.
yeah.
No, just
But how do you measure that?
right. But right. We just said that we don't want to. We care less about particular issues, but to elect people who care about the environment, and I think that is true. But the point is particular issues. We do care about this, and maybe that's the point about the environment being our constituency. We do care about the whole set, but we are going to be opportunistic in what we pick out of that whole set, right? So there's a sweet spot here. The sweet spot is in between getting bogged down on particular issues, which we don't want, but at the same time, absolutely retaining a sense of what we're talking about, right? That is our context, right? So the objective setting is no, it's not. It should not be in that larger political sense, and that's why I said yes. That goal could be a goal for the party as a whole, but we're setting goals for the caucus.
okay, can I go back to our mission statement? How about that?
That's always a good place to start.
Well, and it's, the purpose of the caucus is to equip Democrats across Wisconsin to confidently advocate in support of environmental protection. This is a draft. I'm not sure the final one is
No,
exactly the same.
it didn't change after that.
Yeah.
Section 2, to fulfill its purpose, the caucus shall muster the most authoritative information and persuasive arguments about threats to the environment and appropriate policy responses, thereby building a shared knowledge base, issue agenda, and messaging mechanisms among members of the DPW. So,
It would almost seem that within that one, a strategic objective or goal, whichever one you want to use here, it seems like there needs to be this clearinghouse, this gathering point of all this information that candidates can use.
Authoritative, if I were to pick out of all of this, the phrases that have not worked for us but have gotten in our way sometimes, I would pick authoritative information, because we've had good scientist friends wondering, when are you going to, have me educate everybody about it? And that's, again, that's why that context of winning elections is something we always have to keep in mind, because those, communications mechanisms and the mustering of the arguments is more, what we're about as a political effort. So go ahead, please.
Yeah, well, and I understand what you're saying is trying to create the political argument, but sometimes there has to be this gathering of data and information and ideas and research that is already out there. These groups, whether it's the power line group or the pipeline group or climate lobby, all of these groups have a lot of information, and it's all kind of in these disparate sort of locations.
Cool.
Candidates, if we want to support candidates who are friends of the environment, but aren't all that astute or don't have that kind of background in
Or need help messaging.
or need help messaging. They are looking for the data. Can we serve as sort of the clearinghouse? And we're not going to make judgment on it.
But that somehow in our first 2 years,
Mhm.
you know, right? We developed a sense of ourselves and like what
Mhm.
our unique purpose and how we're
Mhm.
distinct from everyone else, and that's not where we landed.
Well,
We landed on, now I'm looking at one of your political memos. The thing that distinguishes us from other environmental groups is a special focus on spreading forceful political messages to shape voters' perceptions of the
Right.
two parties. And I think being an information clearinghouse was part of that, because
Yeah.
we can't spread forceful messages unless we know what the hey we're talking about.
Well,
It's true.
and this is something I've said, you know, with passion. I'm a Democrat. Stop me before I put on another 10-point plan.
Right.
Yes.
Right? And the very reason, the point of confidence at the top of that mission is not expert. It's enough. It's knowing enough. And there is only so much you need to know.
That is true, but a candidate may want additional information. They can shape, you're not giving them a 10-point plan. You're not saying go out and articulate George Kraft's, thesis on why the Little Plover River is drying up and all of his
And I
calculations.
would say that answer is people, not data.
Yeah.
Right? And because
So
because we've had appeals from other parts of the state, and I know that Melissa Johnson, knows enough about pollutants to be of help to them.
or you share the Star Tribune article, which
Okay. Sure.
which
Yes.
has anybody shared that yet? We need to,
Yes.
because it's people oriented, it's clear, it's
Yeah.
concise. To me, that's the kind of information we want to provide.
Let me put forward an exemplar objective then, that I, from what I'm hearing, as something that would go into this plan. That is both, part of what we're trying to do here, and is measurable, which I think is important. Is to say that one of our objectives is to ensure that every Democratic candidate in the state is informed of and has access to the necessary resources to make environmental issues an effective part of their campaign, and to ensure that they
Yeah.
do so.
I like that.
That fits us.
I like
Yeah.
it.
I like it too.
Right.
That sounds
So-
great, but that's not, that's us developing an objective.
Yes, but that's the question is, what do we say about January 23rd's discussion that will get us developing those? Right.
Yeah, I just put that out there as something that we would want
Yeah.
to include
Right.
in the
Yes.
plan, and how do we
Right.
to seed the discussion of what those
Because
line items should be.
if there are actually a lot of people there, that discussion's going to go everywhere.
Right.
It's going to go all over creation.
And so
we
we
want
should
to
have-
we want to prompt everyone to say that it's that kind of thing that was just put on the table that we are here to look for.
So we've been discussing this for a while, and
Right.
yes, it's going to go everywhere next month. And maybe we just set our sight on one goal, one strategic goal. And then the challenge is all right, what are some of the tactics to achieving that, absent all of these individual issues?
In other words, if you take what I just put out there,
Yeah.
how do we make contact with all of the campaigns?
Right.
Where are the resources necessary
Yeah.
to get the candidate information?
This isn't about your issue, and every time that issue comes up, then you go, no, that is a specific issue. That
So I'm
doesn't-
hearing we need we need to start the discussion a little further in. We need to have already put the bones.
We need to have some
For the
agreement
meat
on
to
at least
be
one
built.
goal that we
Well,
can.
but one. See, the problem is one.
Maybe two, but it's yeah. We want engagement, and the risk of engagement is that you're going to get a lot of people with a lot of ideas. And in doing that, we spread our wings so that there are other people sharing our message. That's a good thing. Bad thing is there's going to be a lot of people with a lot of ideas, and everybody's going to, I have an idea. You know,
I mean,
the
but
kindergartner.
classically, an exercise like this, what you do is be clear about the type, what counts as the kind of aim, goal, objective, whatever you want to call it. It's all the description of where we want to be, right? This is a young effort, and we are ready to talk about what it's going to look like when it's a little, better developed and more mature, right? And say, and we're here to describe that. We're here to look down the road and set some aims for ourselves. And classically, what you would do is you would open it so far. You would say the floor is open to a certain kind of thing. It is open not to pet issues, but your best anticipation and your best vision of the things that you see in us as we've become more successful and more mature. And the discipline you impose on the discussion is to, yes, be throwing the floor open, but throwing the floor open to a particular kind of thing.
Why not, instead of throwing the floor open, why not use that 30-minute social time beforehand to give people a shot? Put up a whiteboard or put up some big tear sheets and say, look, here's the type of thing that we're looking for. Give us your
With the
ideas.
question that
And then
you
we're
just-
looking at
yeah.
what seems to fit.
I believe firmly that the 30-minute social hour should not be structured in any way. From years of teaching small group communication,
Oh,
We
okay.
really should be getting to know you, like we originally discussed.
Mingle.
Schmooze and who do you know? Yeah,
Yeah.
really
Okay.
let.
But that
Yeah.
might be an exercise for, you are going to be, I like that idea because people
Yeah,
get up
I
and
like
move
the
That's
idea.
around.
that's
and
the
they write
segue. That's the segue
Yeah.
into the discussion. That's how we start the
You're
discussion.
providing the context, you're providing the problem, and we can move into the question as you framed it is how do we get, I don't know who framed it, how do we get environmentally friendly or people who are progressive and want to be more environmentally friendly elected to office?
We care less about the particular issues and more
And so how
about
do we do that? We look to them
electing people who care about the environment.
to tell us, because now they're getting the buy-in and they're going to want to go out and do it because they've created the buy-in.
Well,
Get people invested in it.
that's always. We're not just arriving at the idea that we want ownership. What we're struggling with is how to collect views without being in chaos.
I'm okay with a little chaos, to be honest.
But
All right, Donald.
So here's what I understand. We do our best through all of this, through communication in advance, through presentation, through how we lay out the agenda. We do our best to tell people what we're looking for. Then, as the segue to the discussion, we say, okay, capture that. Tell us your ideas for success. For that description of success, for that description of an environmental caucus that's having the right kind of impact, and what that impact is. And then we look at those and we make observations about which even before we discuss, even before we talk about merits, or we just look at them and say which of these seems to be the most responsive, seems to be a goal for the caucus, and then keep hearing ideas and weighing them and honing them.
I'm okay with chaos as long as it's managed.
Sure.
I just feel,
What I've suggested as the discipline is to be mindful of the category of what is an appropriate objective. And the notion is to solicit those ideas at the moment of having given all the cues that we've talked about how we're going to give them. Then say, okay, everybody take a shot and give them 10, 5, 10 minutes, whatever, to write them. We collect them, we look at them, say, this does seem to be more oriented at an issue, not really what we, and that's the discipline. Is again, it's strategic aims for this effort, what we're aimed at, the impact we want to have, and describing that.
I just want to, the reason I say that is that we're going to have a lot of, or hopefully have some new people, and I don't want the chaos to appear to be complete disorganization.
I just also don't want to tamp down on anyone's passion.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
I think we can find the right balance, or not balance, but we can find the right way to express.
I don't want people getting in a fight over issues. That would suck.
What's
Bring it to Twitter like every other civilized person.
Yeah.
What's bothering me is that I'm imagining I found the mission statement, which is different from.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing one overarching goal under which we can start putting other subsidiary goals and objectives. I'm reading the mission statement, and then I'm hearing we want to get more candidates elected who know about the environment, and then I'm hearing our goal is to really differentiate Dems from the GOP in terms of the environment. I'm getting more confused as I'm sitting here about what is our overall goal.
When you read the mission statement, I thought to myself, I think we've changed a little.
Yeah, I know, and that's fine, but I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't, but
maybe we need to start with refining the mission statement.
Well, let me distill down a little what I said earlier then, in that case, in view of what you just said, to just say that our overarching goal is to ensure that environmental issues are a core of every political campaign in Wisconsin. That we shouldn't run a single candidate election anywhere that isn't in some way talking about environmental issues and working toward environmental issues.
I think that is an aim we could set for ourselves, but I'm not sure that that's I think what we're trying to say right now, what we're groping for is what's most essential. I think what's most essential is we believe in the power of these issues for our party. We assume that our party is better. We're in this party because we care about the environment, but we have a caucus because we believe in the power of the issues politically. And so what's most essential is we are trying to leverage that as much as possible. That's what's most essential. We believe that the environment, that those issues favor us, that they help win support for us, that they work for us politically. right?
So,
I think
And
we just said the same thing in two different ways.
yeah.
no, well, no, because I don't know. Do I want to say every single campaign that that maybe, okay, maybe, but
How about every race instead of
no,
Well,
that's
I
fine.
mean,
That's all fine. I'm showing up on the 23rd to talk about that. What I'm saying is, what do we want to say? Okay, go ahead.
I don't think we're ready for the 23rd. I think we need more of this. We need to go in there feeling fairly confident, and I'm not getting that.
We did have mission drift over the last
Yeah.
few months that
And-
has conflicted our
And-
vision of ourselves.
Right, because we didn't have a plan in place, and we were running before we could walk because we had to. So I don't think we're ready. And I would hate to show up and not be ready and disappoint anyone who shows up thinking that they're going to be a part of something really grand and spectacular, and us kind of falling flat on our faces. So I think we should spend a little more time. Again, do we need to go back to that mission? Do we need to better understand that and shape it a little bit? And be prepared. We have to go in prepared.
Yeah.
We don't have a facilitator, so we are the facilitators, and we need to be pretty confident of where we're going.
Most
Being
of
able
what
to bring people back to a focus.
Yeah.
Most of
We
what we've
need-
talked about is our big ideas, and we also have to talk about
We
the
need it.
actual facilitation
Yeah.
process.
I think we've
et cetera, et
lost
cetera.
a sense of the gist, and we do need to look at the official documents,
Right.
but we also need to look at David's memo, the political memo, which is a founding document, and which I think developed a little
Mhm.
from says more than the mission statement says.
I think we would be well served to spend more time as a board planning for this and seeking the kind of meaningful input, because that's what we want, is meaningful input. If we're not ready, we're not going to get meaningful input. So I would suggest, even though I know we would love to see this happen, that we take the next couple of months, the board, let's redefine, look at that mission, the political memo, make sure that we are solid, that we understand, so that we can go into it as a confident group, even though we all have a little bit different ideas. That's fine. That's the power of it. But give it some time, because going into this prematurely, I think, could be somewhat disastrous.
Yeah.
I'm just getting a real bad sense, and I've learned to trust my gut. That's what I always told my clients when I worked domestic violence. If your gut's telling you to get out, get out. And my gut is telling me we're going to go there and we're not ready.
My gut agrees with your gut.
And that's not saying this discussion tonight was really, really good.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really good. A few more of these and we'll be set, but we need to do that.
So do we postpone what we were planning for January, or do we try to fill in other discussions between now and then?
I think we postpone January. We still have a board meeting, but we make it more what we're doing here. We need to be prepared. You're going into a debate in many ways to try and convince people why we, the Environmental Caucus, number one, is important, why it's important to the Democratic Party, why it's important to Wisconsin, and why it's important to them.
Well, since you verbalized that, I'll verbalize what I've been thinking is that for a statewide organization, it's kind of insane to have a membership meeting to formulate a strategic plan on a weekday evening in a couple of hours.
Yeah.
I think.
Right.
I mean, wouldn't it be, we'd be better served by getting people together for a Saturday morning, 3 hours on a Saturday morning with lunch or something like that.
I think so. And probably have to wait until after the spring election. Weekends, anybody who has an opponent weekends are gonna be spent campaigning.
I'm gonna be on the street.
She's gonna be on the street, and I don't know if I've got an opponent, I very well might, so.
You haven't done anything controversial. What do you mean?
Not a damn thing. And that,
She's just more discreet than some of us who gained opponents.
No, not at all.
not at all.
Being a Democrat is controversial.
Yeah, it's
anyway.
controversial.
It's true.
So
So it's a board meeting to do something in a similar spirit to what we were going to do in a large group, but we thought
Get a little
that,
more
but we
refined.
think that
yeah,
that in a smaller group and in the official leadership is more
Yeah.
appropriate.
plan a big
and
event.
So, and so,
Yeah.
and
We need more
switch back here
Yeah.
We need more framework.
switch back here from
Yes.
Green Bay.
Yes,
That would also make me more comfortable to contemplate the court's issue of the spring election
yeah,
in the next couple of months too.
Yeah.
You know.
yeah. Let's make sure we're solid, we're sound. We go into it framing it up, teeing it up so that we can avoid conflict, we can get productive, meaningful feedback, and we can engage a broader audience who can help us spread that message and create that confidence across the state.
We went a little too far in the spirit of transparency.
Yeah, that's okay. It's
No,
okay
no,
to
no,
say.
no. I'm
Yeah.
just sitting here trying
Yeah.
to think of, and
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of kind of how we got ahead of ourselves
Yeah.
is with throwing too much too wide open.
Let's make sure, and it'd be wonderful if people, participated and showed up, and it's open board meetings, members can attend, but ultimately it's the board's work that has to be solid before we go into this, so.
Yeah, and
Because-
what is also true is that that the officers with some of the board members, and particularly a few, pretty consistently have been having discussions rather than capital T, capital B, the board.
Yeah.
Right.
We can do this, we're just
Right.
not ready.
This would also give us a chance to analyze Dan's
Yeah.
findings and figure out really how
Yeah,
they
what's that
apply
gonna
to
do?
How we can use it.
I'm
meeting.
intrigued.
Yeah, I am too, I'm actually
You know,
terrified,
rather
but
than hearing
Well, I
them for
actually
the
look
first
at
time
our
at the
Bearsman
meeting.
County in that way.
Although you
Yeah.
you
So
shared the
different.
bottom line with us, I
Like
believe,
my district from
right? Because the
everywhere,
shortfall is we,
basically.
yeah.
we
I think
busted
that's
our
true
butt.
everywhere.
Yeah.
It's just we gotta
Um,
figure out how to use
Wasn't
it.
that
Yep.
the same thing
And-
that Ed Miller said at our meeting? Were you at the meeting with Ed Miller?
I came in late, I was at a forum with him that,
Yeah.
our
Turning
Wisconsin.
our voters didn't get us there.
Yeah, Ed Miller has a lot of that because he was talking about it at our Wisconsin Revolution, so. I missed it here, but he
Oh,
did the same
okay,
thing
yeah,
at
and I heard it
OWR,
here.
so.
Yeah, there's some surprising stuff, I think, coming up in the stat. I mean, I'm not certain about it yet, but
Yeah.
one thing that I am looking at hard that I think is very telling is the Baldwin overvote vote and
Oh,
where
yeah.
it came from.
Yeah.
Because there's just this general notion that it was, suburban moms who were read at home but cared about abortion in the Supreme Court, so they went with Baldwin. But that doesn't seem to be where those extra votes came from. Her strength was in different places, and I haven't figured out what the pattern
I have
is yet.
Republican friends who voted for her. They voted for Scott Walker and they voted for Tammy
Oh
Baldwin.
yeah, there's a
It's-
huge
Yep.
ballot split,
And
and I can't
every
figure out what
single-
the issue was.
Every single one of them said she gets stuff done.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be the conventional wisdom
No.
about, you know, so.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, very good discussion, I
Yeah.
think. And, but yeah, I think, because you know what, we had a lot of criticism about why environmental caucus was needed. It's not an underrepresented constituency. There was that. We want to make sure that we have a level of success. We want to make sure we can show that we're grown up and we're ready to not only play with.
I mean, we hold our head pretty high relative to other caucuses.
I would say
really
so.
don't,
Yeah.
and I think if I take anything away from the experience, it's more that nobody's paying attention.
Right.
And nobody truly respects, efforts like this.
Until something happens.
Well,
Yeah.
right, and I've been rereading a lot of my, kind of punctuated equilibrium and all the, theory of how
Rest
policy
in peace,
change
Stephen
happens. And the multiple streams theory and all that good stuff. But I think we can at one at the same time say we're not ready to throw things open to a larger group without linking that to any burden of proof we bear with respect to the state party, because I just don't think we have any.
Right,
I think
right.
we're we're trying to get them focused and get them to appreciate the potential that's clear. We don't have a burden of proof.
No, we don't.
We're going about building the most effective effort we can.
Yeah, and I truly believe that Martha and friends don't check on the status of the environmental caucus every night before they go to bed. But maybe someday we can have that happen. So,
Frankly, that's a potential. That would be a candidate goal, right? To get the center of the party's leadership to be drawing on issue efforts. But I think that where we need to bring the board is clarity on what it means to set goals and what it means to give shape to a strategy.
Right.
Yep, thank you.
all right.
Leaving you.
To stop
Thanks,
using
everybody.
Antibacterial soap.
Yeah.
Yeah.